everyone, and welcome to New Consciousness Review. I'm Miriam Knight, and our guest today is Paul von Ward, an interdisciplinary cosmologist and scholar who has been studying the evolution of consciousness and the place of man within a conscious multiverse. His research interests include reincarnation, the influence of advanced beings on human development, the scope and nature of human and non-human consciousness, religious worldviews in societal conflicts, the reform of social institutions, and natural spirituality. Paul has graduate degrees from Harvard and Florida State University, and during his career he has served as a psychologist, a Protestant minister, U.S. naval officer, and American diplomat. He's the founder of an international nonprofit for cross-cultural understanding and peace, and the author of The Soul Genome, Science and Reincarnation, and Our Solarian Legacy, Multidimensional Humans in a Self-Learning Universe. Today we're going to discuss his latest book, We've Never Been Alone, A History of Extraterrestrial Intervention. Welcome, Paul. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm delighted to be with you. A very successful show.
Thank you. Now, this book had so much meat in it, Paul, I hardly know where to start. So let's start with the question of advanced beings. You lump together gods, angels, ETs, and spirit entities under the rubric advanced beings. What defines an advanced being?
Well, the reason I use the term advanced beings as sort of a generic way to talk about other beings that we have evidence of in the universe that are more advanced than humans. And by more advanced than humans, I mean that they perhaps have technological advances over human beings. They may be in other dimensionals or in extra-dimensional groups and areas of the universe that we don't have direct contact with. And that this whole panoply of beings in the universe, I'm sure some are not as advanced as humans, but the ones we're talking about are those more advanced than humans. And so I'm trying to get away from terms like gods and aliens and angels and devils and demons and those kinds of terms, because they all come from a particular worldview, an a priori concept of what they are by using these terms. And what I've tried to do in this book is to say, let's look at all of the evidence for all of these types of beings that we have accounts of in our history and in our present era. Mm-hmm. And think of them as natural species, other types of beings, and put ourselves alongside them as, the living organisms of a self-conscious living universe.
What has been their role in human history, and do you think they're still with us?
Well, I think that they are still with us, and we can talk about examples of that. And I do think that they had impact on both our physical evolution and more importantly than physical evolution, I think our conscious evolution over the last several thousand years. And that's what I focus on more in this particular book, that we've never been alone. We can just, briefly say something that there's a lot of evidence that they are still with us in one form or the other. We have a lot of concrete evidence to suggest that beings more advanced than humans are in our skies from time to time, have actually had physical contact with some humans. The evidence suggests that. We also have reports of voices speaking to humans, channeling material, or communicating through other media from other dimensions. So that, we have that whole phenomenon around us, that we're embedded in life in this multiverse of ours. And so let's just say that's a given for the moment, and then go back into history. What I try to do is to say, what if the stories from all of our early civilizations were not allegories or metaphors or myths or delusions, but actually interactions with real beings, real entities. And going from that
starting point,
premise, a starting point, then we look for evidence that they have influenced us. And so the book is about that, looking at physical evidence, looking at psychological evidence, cultural evidence, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love the way that you talk about these sort of great technological leaps forward, particularly post-flood, post-cataclysm. Tell us about the events that transpired about 11,500 years ago.
Okay. Before describing that, I would like to say that I think there is considerable evidence that advanced civilizations existed before this worldwide global cataclysm of about 11 to 12,000 years ago. And we could talk about that, and we could say, we don't really know whether some of these advanced civilizations like Atlantis and others that are talked about in our history text were they human? Were they humans and more advanced beings together? I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that we had both advanced beings and humans in that era. But what happened about 11 or 12,000 years ago was a global cataclysm that we know in our Western culture is the flood. But the flood from the Hebrew text and the Sumerian text don't tell the whole story. And I quote a book that's over 10 years old now, written by a couple of British scholars, Allen and Dallaire, who surveyed research from many disciplines, from biology, geology, anthropology, the researches that have been made around the globe to measure and document the effects of this cataclysm. And that's in terms of uplifting of mountain chains, subsidence of the coastlines of many of the continents, or most of the continents actually, the tales about a nuclear winter kind of situation where the Earth was dark for a long period of time, tsunamis, floods, volcanic activity, and so on. And in that particular book alone, there are about 500 studies that document this kind of material, and they all point to our testing of dates for some of these things. It's a little bit fuzzy still, but if you look at them as a collection, they all point to this period about 11,500 years ago. And it's interesting that that is also the time that the last ice age ended, and it ended rather abruptly, not the way other ice ages had gradually just petered out at the end. We had a waning of the ice age before that, but it abruptly ended about that time. So what happened is that any of these ancient advanced civilizations are not advanced civilizations. I think we had Aboriginal cultures around the world. You had independent cultures of Homo sapiens who were outside of this AB human cooperation civilization that we might call Atlantis. But most of those people, most of the humans, didn't survive that cataclysm. And in fact, mainstream scientists today calculate that, at that point, humans may have been down at a level of less than 1 million, or maybe at most, 1 million or 2 humans around the whole planet.
So what I found so fascinating about the flood was that you talk about pre-flood different cults being kind of worshiping different advanced beings. And some of them were more predisposed to being kind and helpful towards humans than others. And then the ones that liked their humans managed to save some subset of them during the flood. I mean, that's just a kind of a fascinating scenario that you draw there.
Well, I think that that's the really central point of the rest of human history, that is, since that cataclysm, because some groups had advice from these more advanced beings, or at least assistance of one kind or the other. For example, up in your part of the world, the Snohomish Native Americans there talk about their ancient tales of being told that this was coming and that they should get high in the mountains, and they did, and they survived. We have the story, of course, in the Hebrew text about Noah and his family being given some advance warning that this was going to happen, and they prepared themselves and survived. And as the floodwaters and the other effects of this cataclysm dissipated, then the advanced beings came back and helped them in terms of technical assistance. And it's interesting that the evidence for this falls in what we call Eastern Turkey at this point. Biologists tell us that the first fruits and grains and so on that we can date at this point in time all sort of popped up in that area. And it's also interesting that we now have in the news sites in that area, Göbekli Tepe, which is a site in present Turkey that is dated to that period, 12,000 years ago. Also, Hatalkoyuk, which is another site that is dated to about that period of time. So we see that after that cataclysm, quite sophisticated civilizations popped up immediately. When I was in school, we were told that at that time, people were living in their caves around the world, that was the Neolithic era, the New Stone Age, when everybody was, more or less cave people and using their stone axes and so on. Now we know that that story was not correct.